Hey there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com. I'm so happy you've joined me today for another STAMPtember card. Today we'll be doing some Copic spotlight coloring. I'm not super experienced with Copics, and I was absolutely thrilled with how this card design came together and with how the rainbow colored unicorn came out. So let's get started. Today we're going to be using Simon Says Stamps Magical Birthday stamp set and the Spiritual Sentiment stamp set. Here you can see the Copic markers I've used. I'll have the colors listed on the blog post as well. So let's get started with stamping. We're going to be using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink since we'll be doing Copic coloring. And I'm using the Tim Holtz stamp platform. So I double stamped each one of these unicorns, and at this point I wasn't entirely sure what the background was going to look like. I knew that I wanted multiple unicorns in the background. I'm going to go ahead and use the Simon Says Stamp Transparency Grid here, not necessarily to help me line up the stamp, but so that I don't get black ink on the card front panel. I'm very much known for that. I tend to get stray ink in a bunch of different places, so that transparency is super helpful for me. So I'm going to go down in a diagonal pattern here, and it's at this point I realized if I'm going to go through the effort of stamping this background, I might as well do more than one panel. So I decided to use Simon Says Stamp's Barely Beige ink, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do spotlight coloring, I thought a couple different things. I thought, well, maybe I will have one of them in black ink and the rest of them in Barely Beige ink so that it really stands out. And then I decided that I would do the whole background in Barely Beige ink and do perhaps a no line coloring on that particular card. So for today, we're only going to end up using the card front panel with the black unicorns. However, I'll hold on to that other card front for a future card. Perhaps I'll do that in a different medium, not quite sure yet. So again, with the double stamping of the ink to make sure I've got full coverage, and then I'm just going to flip that piece of cardstock around so that I can stamp that last unicorn on the top there. I finally got the misty corners, which have been super helpful. I definitely love those. Such a great investment, so I highly recommend those. So we've got our last Barely Beige unicorn here. We'll go ahead and stamp the black one, and then at this point I'm going to take a look at the design and figure out, okay, what else am I going to do with this background? So I'm going to use that transparency again to make sure that I don't ink up the panel. I left more of the design process in here because that was a request that I got from some of my blog post readers. So this video is longer than what you typically see from me, not only because a lot of the design process, but also the Copic coloring. So playing around with the stamp, it doesn't look like adding any additional unicorns is going to fit very well. So I'm going to leave that as a diagonal and figure out what to do with all that white space later. So we're going to start with the Copic coloring. We're doing rainbow hair on our unicorn today, and for each color I'm going to use 3 different shades of that color. Again, the markers will be listed on my blog post. So this is a really small area that I'm working in, and so I was really scared that too much ink was going to bleed out of those really narrow strands of hair. So where I started off with my mid-tone, kind of towards the end you're going to see me start with my darkest marker and use just a little bit of the lightest color and also some of the mid-tone to try and not completely saturate the paper. I was really worried that I was going to end up bleeding out if I continued. So with this pink shade, you can see me just adding and adding and adding. I'm actually quite surprised that it didn't bleed out. Super happy that it didn't. But that is something that you want to think about. The paper can only hold so much ink. So just be aware of that. And so where I might normally with Copic start with my lightest, then do my mid-tone, then go to my darkest, and then back out to mid-tone and lightest, I don't know in this small space that you have that much ability to add that much ink without it bleeding. So we'll move on to the next color, and I'm going to go ahead and play some music through the Copic coloring because it's the same thing over and over, and I'll catch you back. If you're not interested in watching the Copics, go ahead and fast forward. All right, that's it for the rainbow colored hair. So we're going to move on to the body. Since I haven't done too many critters before, I'm going to go ahead and start with my W1 so that I can map out the shadows in a lighter color. I don't want to right off the bat commit to the darker markers. With the W1 you can go in and use your zero marker to pretty easily remove it if you need to. So I'm going to start with that, and then I will move on to the W3, W5. I think I might even put in some W7 to get some darker contrast at some point. As we go through this, it's very similar to the hair, but you've got a little bit more room to work with. I'm going to go ahead and put on some music, and I'll catch you back when we're done with the body. The other thing to make note of is I had pointed out a small area on the blue part of the tail where I had gone out of the line. I find if you use your zero marker to try and clean that up right away, sometimes it can bleed. So I'm letting that paper dry out a little bit, and then I'll go in closer to the end to clean that up. So I will catch you back in a bit. All right, so here I've grabbed the zero marker, and I'm not necessarily using it to remove a lot of the gray marker. I'm really using it to soften the edges of that lightest gray and feather that out a little bit. I'm also going to use it to clean up that blue that we talked about earlier. So there was just a little on the inside there, and then on the outside of the blue tail, you want to be careful about using too much. So do a little bit on it, and if you feel like it still needs more, but you've used a lot and you can see your paper's really wet, let it dry and then go back at it again versus continuing while it's still wet. It will cause it to bleed. So here I grabbed a Sakura. This is a metallic pen from them. I think it's just beautiful. I love it, and I think it's perfect for this. So I'm just filling in the hooves and the horn, and I thought it was just a perfect color for this application. So just filling those in, and we'll let that dry. So now we need to figure out what to do with all of that white space. I suppose you could leave it, but it seemed a little unfinished to me. So what I decided to do was bring out the black ink in the stamping with some black card panels on the side. So I have marked the top left corner, and I'm marking the inside of that stamping on the left. And then I'm doing that on the other side as well. And I just took it to the paper trimmer and cut it off. So basically I'm cutting out that middle strip so that the only white part of the card will be where the unicorns are. And then I'll pop up this black cardstock on some foam tape. But you can see here I didn't cut quite enough off on the inside edge on the right, so I'm just going to remark that and trim it again. And that looks really nice. So I felt like it needed a finished edge. Oh, before I get to that, I'm trying to decide here, do I want my sentiment in the top right, bottom left? I opted on the top right next to the Spotlight Unicorn. I think this is a great sentiment from the Spiritual Sentiment stamp set. And I feel like the Spotlight stamping really helps to illustrate that sentiment. You know, we need you out of the crowd. We need to believe in magic of unicorns. There's just a lot of things that that sentiment could mean. So I did feel like those pieces of black cardstock needed a little something. I tried to cut strips of this this gold glitter paper, and it just seemed too much. It was too bright. It wasn't the same color. So what I'm going to do is use the same gold that I heat embossed the sentiment in. I cut 2 strips of black paper. I have temporarily adhered it to this black piece of cardstock just to have a handle so that when I heat set it, I'm not burning my fingers or needing to put tweezers right on the strip. And when you use your temporary adhesive, just make sure you press it down really firmly. And mine fell off and I needed to re-adhere it. But I'm just going to go ahead and heat set this. Then I'll pop it off the temporary adhesive. And once it's cooled, I'm going to go ahead and get it glued to the black panels. That is Ranger Multimedia Matte Adhesive. I couldn't let too much of the gold embossed strip show because you can see when I put it on the card, it's going to be pretty close to the horse's nose. And I wanted to leave enough of a gap there for the card design. So I'm just going to slap a stamp block on that until it dries, which will just be a couple minutes. And I'm going to go ahead and outline the horn and the hooves here. I lost a little bit of the black ink outline of the stamp when I used the gold marker. So I just want to fill that in and reestablish that line. I covered the back of both of those black panels with foam tape. And I'm going to go ahead and pop that up on the card front, making sure that I have it lined up appropriately. In here, I'm just showing that the glitter cardstock was too much, so I'm glad I took the extra time to do the embossed strips. I hope you enjoyed this card today. I absolutely love this card. This might be one of my favorite cards from this set that I did for STAMPtember. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel and my blog at notableink.com so that you don't miss any of the other cards or any future video tutorials. Thank you so much for stopping by, and be sure to follow along with STAMPtember. As Simon Says Stamp, it has a ton of random promotions going on that you don't want to miss out on. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a great day.